Welcome to MoocLab's interview series, where I talk to people from different walks of life who are all involved in online learning and massive open online courses, otherwise known as MOOCs. My name is Carolyn McIntyre. I'm CEO of a website called MoocLab.club, which helps to connect people to online learning. Today I'm in for a real treat because I'll be talking to Laurie Pickard, who is known in the MOOC world for getting a business education equivalent to an MBA entirely using MOOCs and for under $1,000. On the back of this amazing achievement, Laurie then launched the No-Pay MBA project, which supports people who are studying to get an MBA equivalent education using free and low-cost online resources. Laurie currently works in Rwanda in international development. So let's go over to Rwanda and say hi to Laurie.
Hi, Carolyn. It's a real pleasure to be here. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Great. Well, thank you very much on this interview series. I'm very excited to hear a little bit more about you and what you do. Maybe we could just start off with asking you what led you to a career in international development.
Sure. So I've always been interested in travel and in exploring other cultures. And I had a real epiphany moment while I was in undergrad. So while I was doing my bachelor's degree, I didn't really know about global poverty before. And at that moment, I guess I was in an international politics class, and it really just dawned on me for the first time how much disparity there is in the world between the wealthy and the poor. And it became a topic, trying to understand why is this the case, became something that really fascinated me intellectually and also from an ethical standpoint. And so from there, I studied international development much more and ultimately ended up in a career working in this field.
Great. Well, that's quite an interesting pathway. And how did MOOCs come on the scene? How were you first introduced to MOOCs?
Well, maybe I can kind of walk you through a little bit more of my career path. So that was while I was an undergraduate. And then when I graduated from college, my first job was as a teacher. And that was in Philadelphia in the public school district. And I was working in a pretty rough neighborhood that had a real shortage of teachers. So I did that, and that was really, I really enjoyed getting the opportunity to try to understand American cities a little bit better and realize that there's a lot of poverty and inequality in the United States as well as abroad. And then after 2 years of teaching, I went to graduate school and studied geography, which really, I guess, geography makes a lot of sense for me because it's really the study of the world as we find it. So it's very global, very expansive, and that's been kind of a theme for me, I guess, throughout my life, is just wanting to understand the world that we live in and asking questions about, why? Why do we see poverty in one place and wealth in another? Why do we see what we see in the world? But after studying geography for 2 years, I didn't want to go back into teaching. And I just thought, if I'm going to have an international career, the time is now. And so I joined the Peace Corps, which is America, the United States' Goodwill and Development Program. It's a government program. And it places people for 2 years in poor countries to do development work and to live in really rural settings and learn and teach. And so I did that in Nicaragua. So I was there actually for 3 years as a Peace Corps volunteer. And by the time I finished, I had a really, I guess I had a conviction that that business can really be a force for poverty reduction, just based on what I had seen, based on the people I had met, based on some of the work that I had done. And I stayed on in Nicaragua and ended up working at the International Finance Corporation on a coffee project. So coffee being one of the main export crops of Latin America or Central America, where I was. And after that, so I got married while I was in Nicaragua and was moving with my husband to Rwanda, where we are now. And I thought, okay, I'm really in this field now. I'm in international development. I'm doing this. And, it's a pretty competitive field. And the kind of work that I wanted to do, I had really come to have this sort of business perspective on how do you alleviate poverty. there's a lot of social entrepreneurship work that was really starting to speak to me, and just a lot more of the kind of, I guess, private sector-led development was what was really capturing my interest. So I really felt the need to better understand the tools of business and better understand the frameworks of how do business people see the world? How does business kind of factor into international development? And I felt like I probably needed the kind of education that you get in an MBA. But being on this process of going to Rwanda, being in international development, it just didn't seem like a great idea for me to kind of drop out of the work world, potentially be separated from my husband. I didn't know what kind of educational opportunities there might be in Rwanda, but I doubted that that would be kind of the education system I'd want to be educated in. So this was right around the time that MOOCs started to become popular, and I heard about MOOCs while I was in Nicaragua. I thought, would it be possible to kind of piece together a business education using what's out there online? And I thought, if nobody's tried this, I should do it. And it turned out no one else had really tried it in a public way, and so that's how I started this project.
Wow. And how did you actually go about putting together the curriculum? Did you have a method for this?
I started just by looking across a bunch of different MBA programs and saying, okay, what courses does everybody take in their first year? And I really, truly had nowhere to start. I didn't know anything about what a business program was like. I had studied economics in college, but I hadn't, I didn't have kind of a comprehensive view of like, well, what is an MBA? I just knew it was something that business people get and that it's important. So I was really starting from zero. So I looked on the websites of top universities. I knew Harvard was a big university. I knew Wharton School of Business was a well-recognized business school. And so I just went to their curriculum pages and started comparing what do their students learn. And I really went for like, what do I know the least about? And I'm going to start there. So the first thing I studied was accounting. So I found an accounting course and took it. And it really was very eye-opening. I learned how to read a balance sheet. Those are like the first things that I did. And those were things that I felt like were kind of like deficits as well in me as a professional, that it gave me so much confidence to actually complete a course on financial accounting and be like, okay, I can read any company's balance sheet and know what the lines on it mean.
That's really great. And did you only use MOOCs in your online study, or did you use other sources?
So I've used I've used primarily MOOCs. And so to get back to your earlier question about, how did I put together my curriculum, I sort of went iteratively from there. So I picked, the thing I knew the least about, and then started filling in gaps from there. So at that time, there weren't quite as many MOOCs out there as there are now. So I would just kind of look through everything that was available in the realm of business on, Coursera, on edX, on Udacity, and I just would take whatever course was there. And I would usually pick like a theme. Like I would say, okay, this semester or over the next several months, I'm going to focus on finance. And I would take as many classes as I could find. And I would look for courses not just on the MOOC platforms, but also on iTunes U. I would look for things on YouTube. I would do some reading about the topic. So I would sort of pick a theme and try to like immerse myself in it. Like, what do finance people do? Like, what do they study? What should they all know? Who are the major thinkers? And I would try to like kind of immerse myself in that through whatever way that I could. Okay. And through books as well. I read a lot of books.
So you did do some of the more traditional type of learning as well? Absolutely. Okay. And how long did it take you from beginning to end to complete the program that you would consider equivalent to an MBA?
Well, I love this question because I actually don't feel like I'm done, and I'm not sure I'll ever be done. So I guess I'm planning to kind of formally graduate or finish with the whole course of study in May of this year. And I just have a few more. I guess for me, finance is kind of like at the core of business school, and I want to be really knowledgeable about finance in order to say that I'm finished. So I'm taking one more set of courses on finance, and then I think I'll be pretty much done. But one of the things that studying by MOOC has really revealed for me is that the kind of just-in-time nature of MOOCs has been so wonderful. It's like I need to know something, I can take a course, I can apply it to the problem at hand right away. And that to me is such a huge benefit. And I doubt there will ever be a time in my life when there isn't a problem at hand, that there's some kind of information that I could seek out and find and be able to apply right away.
Yes, that's the beauty of this type of learning. It's accessible whenever you need it.
Absolutely.
For the time that you've been using this type of study online, what problems did you encounter, if any, and if so, how did you overcome them?
So I wouldn't necessarily describe problems, because I think this form of learning is just such a gift. I mean, it was so unexpected. You know, I had wanted an MBA or a business education and thought, you know, I don't know, that was the real problem. Is like, how am I going to get this education if it isn't physically where I am, and it costs a lot more money than I'm willing to spend, or, you know, the debt I don't want to go into. That was the problem. MOOCs are a solution. So I haven't really found too many problems with the style of learning itself. However, I would say that there are certain things that are more easily addressed in a classroom environment than in a MOOC environment. And specifically, those have to do with kind of the human interaction. So feeling like I didn't really have any peers in this was something that I felt was really lacking. And I would also say maybe a lack of mentorship as well. You know, I now I have a lot more mentors. Now I have a lot more peers, you know, now that I have started this network. But the real reason for creating the network is to say these are problems, or these are my pain points as a student, was that I didn't have the human feel of being part of a learning community. And so that's what I want to provide for people. But other than that, you know, I didn't really find any problems per se.
Well, that's very encouraging. It's leading on from the point you just made about peers. You write in one of your blogs on your website that the people you meet in your business education are as important, if not more important, than what you learn in the classroom. How does this translate into an online environment?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think, you know, this, I do believe that the people that you meet throughout your education are just as important as what you learn, but I really mean that in the broadest sense. So there are people who I've never physically met, and people who I've never actually even talked to, who I feel like have really influenced me by their thinking, by what they put out into the world. And I'm talking about, you know, authors whose work I've read, even some of the MOOC professors who their work has influenced, I guess, how I think. But then having kind of a social experience of learning is also really important. And I think, you know, talking, I guess for me, the being out in the world and talking about the kind of education that I was doing, and doing that in a public way, and facing, you know, people challenging me, like, is this really worth it? You know, what are you doing? Do you really think that it's that employers will recognize it? Having to defend myself in that kind of way was also a critical part of my learning. So even if these weren't necessarily peers who were alongside me in the education, I guess having that that human interaction was really key. And then I've also, by virtue of having a website, have met so many amazing people who have either come to me and said, hey, I'm studying in this way too, or entrepreneurs who are working, like, such as yourself, you know, who are working in this space. Those connections have been really critical for me to kind of really fully develop into somebody who understands how business works.
Great. So you think it's fully possible in an online environment to get the same networking possibilities as you would if you were studying an MBA on a campus?
I think you have to be extremely proactive about it. So I think you have to make a practice of putting yourself out into the world and attracting other people who are kind of a like mind with you. I think you also have to find people who are not of a like mind with you and defend yourself. And then I think you have to seek out the people who can be your mentors. And in a very proactive way. I mean, I think cold emailing people or asking to be introduced, I think that process is really important to actually make connections with people who can help you take the next step.
Which in fact is very similar to a real life situation. The same steps that you've just mentioned are things that you have to do in the real world. So yes. Not much difference really. Yeah. So you've mentioned a little bit about your No-Pay MBA project. Can you tell us a little bit more about what it offers and how it works?
Sure. So I run what I call a network or a learning community of people who are dedicated to kind of putting together their own MBA. So I provide a set of resources to help that make that easier, and also to get the kind of in-person connection or human connection that you don't get automatically in MOOCs. So that includes a handbook and a list of courses, which I update all the time. And that kind of curriculum piece, I'm constantly tweaking it and refining it and trying to do the best I can to kind of guide people through an MBA curriculum and say, like, what are the best resources that are out there now that you can get, and how do you need to take advantage of those resources in order to get a truly stellar education? So that's one piece, like that kind of guidance. And then the part that I think is the most exciting and the most fun is that I connect people in a social learning environment. So we have a group on Slack where everybody in the network can kind of interact and communicate, and then we meet up once a month for an in-person video, or not in-person live, but a video conference where there's always a theme and there's usually some prep work that people do, there's some discussion, and then we take courses together and do projects together.
Okay, and have you had a lot of interest? I mean, you may not want to disclose that information, but how many people have you got on board?
Sure, I've got about 50 people on board right now. So we're a small group, but we're growing. And actually, not being too huge is kind of a blessing at this stage because it's such a work in progress. I think, you know, one of the things that's been really interesting for me is to see how much of a hunger people have to kind of be in community with each other, and how difficult that actually is to do across distance. You know, I think the remaining motivated to take the classes, so that initial excitement, a lot of people are excited at the beginning, but having the follow through to actually finish what you committed to doing is really challenging. And it's challenging not just, I guess, how do I say it? So it's not just challenging kind of on an overall basis, like, oh, I decided to do this and I'm gonna make it all the way to the end. It's challenging every time. Like, it's challenging every time you're gonna log in and do the next assignment in a course. It's challenging, I guess, at every moment. You have to kind of have like a real well of motivation to get through this and to continue to engage with it on a really high level. And figuring out what's the best way to foster that in people in the context of a network has been a really fun challenge. And it's really exciting to see when people do actually engage, like, what do they find most engaging? What kind of brings them back again and again to this experience and to engaging with one another.
Okay, and would you have any particular advice to give someone who would be interested in pursuing an MBA using your network and your list of courses?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the big things is to have a big goal in mind, you know, something that will continue to motivate you day after day. If it's just curiosity, or if it's, how do I say it? If it's more like a passive type of goal, then I don't think that that's really strong enough necessarily. So if it's just, okay, I want an MBA because I think people who have MBAs, they do well in the job market. Well, that's important, but that's a very non-specific goal. So if you have a more specific goal, it's like, I need to know this material for a concrete reason, because it's going to help me in the job that I already have, or because it's going to help me get a job I really want, or it's going to help me do this work that I'm very passionate about. I think that's more of a kind of sustaining type of goal. And the people who I've known who have been most successful are the people who have that kind of like something to apply this education to right away. That's something that's bigger. It goes beyond the education itself.
Yeah, that's probably very true. Have a very clear goal in mind. There's a lot of controversy around MOOCs and a lot of discussion around MOOCs. You know, are they disruptive? Are they really? Do they do what they were set out to do, etc.? I'd be very interested to know how you see the world of online education 10 years from now.
Oh, that's a good question. So 10 years from now. Well, so I guess one of the things that I found really interesting about the conversation about MOOCs kind of overall is the disruption fever, I guess I'll call it, which is to say that there was this big spike in interest, and oh, MOOCs are going to revolutionize learning as we know it, and they're going to leave a trail of fallen universities in their wake, and this is the end of traditional education as we know it. Well, I think that's not exactly the case. So for one thing, it's universities that are producing this content, so we need them, and they still have a pretty vital role to play, I think. But I do think that what we will see are options. So I think there will be many different, what I'd love to see actually is just many different pathways that people could take to get the education that they want. So I think, you know, we operate in a pretty linear model of education, which says, okay, there's a certain time when you're supposed to do your education. If you missed it at that time, well, okay, you can, you know, maybe try to go back and get that education you were supposed to get, but it will never be as good. If you missed, in my case, you know, I did one master's, and then when I wanted to do another kind of master's type education in business, it just didn't seem to make sense at that stage in my life. But I think what's wonderful about MOOCs that is what I was saying before, the on-demand nature. So I think we'll just see so many more options for how people can become educated at the time when it makes sense for them to get that education.
Yeah, it's definitely exciting times, I think, where education is concerned. And finally, Laurie, what are your personal goals for the future?
Well, I have a lot of them. So I'm really enjoying kind of fostering a learning community, and so I think that's something that I'll continue to engage with. I also have plans to write a book. I'm pretty excited about working on that.
Will that be MOOC related?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Yeah, so about business education and MOOCs and kind of the same thing I've been writing about, but kind of putting it all together in one package. And then I'm also really excited about coming up with some of the things that you were just talking about. You know, what do we expect to see in 10 years? Well, I'd like to be one of the architects of what will we see come out of this. I think, you know, we're still in very early days of MOOCs, and there's really no telling where this is going to go. But getting to work on that problem of how do we take these wonderful educational resources that are out there and make them really applicable for people's lives, meet them where they are, and help them to use these resources in such a way that they can achieve the goals they want to achieve. That's something I really want to be a part of.
Well, I'll be fascinated to watch your journey and see the things that are created, and I'm sure will be part of it, Laurie. Thank you so much for taking part and for sharing some very, very insightful experiences and advice with us. And I wish you the best of luck with your project and all future projects.
Thank you, Carolyn. It's been a real pleasure.
Likewise. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.